It looked harmless. But she knew better. Inside that envelope was 9 months of denial waiting to be read in black ink. She didn't sit down. Didn't sip the espresso. She just stared at the waves and waited for the courage to stop pretending. Below, pacing near the white Bentley, her husband Dean Holloway barked orders into a phone like the world depended on him being angry. He wore his signature uniform, tailored suit, polished Oxfords, and the absence of awareness. He didn't look up. Not once. Didn't notice the robe. The envelope. The silence. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to Cedar Light Love Stories, a safe space where love, hope, and healing shine bright. If you believe in the power of real stories to inspire hearts, you're in the right place. Drop "I believe in love" in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe so you never miss a story that warms your spirit. Dean thought the pregnancy made her distant. What he didn't realize was, Amira had drifted away long before the second pink line showed up. She drifted the moment her sobs in the shower became part of her routine. She drifted the moment she realized wealth couldn't replace presence. And presence? It had a name. Soren Vale. Her chief of security. The man who stood outside the doctor's office when Dean couldn't be bothered. The man who stood outside the delivery room like a sentry carved out of discipline. The man who hadn't touched her, not yet, but whose eyes held her like Dean's arms never could. She opened the envelope. No tears. Not yet. Just numbers. Clean. Clinical. Paternity exclusion. 99.9% Dean Holloway is not the biological father. Her breath didn't hitch. It stopped entirely. She stared ahead, unmoving, as the air thickened around her. Then, just like that, the first tear rolled. Not loud. Not messy. Just still. It wasn't the betrayal. It was the confirmation that her instincts had been right. Dean hadn't lost a child. He had lost her. She was halfway down the hall when Dean finally noticed her. He hung up his call and walked toward her fast, holding his phone like it was still his weapon. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice tight. Amira didn't break stride. The silk robe swayed, catching the light like liquid gold. She didn't owe him an answer, but she gave him one anyway. "To destroy the man I once trusted," she said evenly, "and to protect the man who showed up when you couldn't." Dean blinked. He wasn't used to that tone. What the hell is that supposed to mean? She handed him the envelope. He tore it open. Read. Went pale. You're serious?" Amira tilted her head, voice like silk pulled taut. "What hurts more, Dean? That you're not the father, or that you lost me before the test even came back?" Dean opened his mouth, but no sound came. Because for once, control didn't belong to him. Amira turned her back. Not in rage. Not in tears. In clarity. She walked down the staircase like a woman who had buried the lies, mourned the truth, and decided to choose herself. And Dean? He stood there, envelope still in hand, watching the only thing he couldn't schedule, predict, or purchase. Walk away. Dean Holloway stood frozen at the top of the stairs, the DNA results trembling in his hand like the paper had a pulse of its own. He reread the sentence. Then again. Paternity exclusion, 99.9%. He blinked rapidly, as if his disbelief could undo what science had confirmed. "No," he muttered. "No, this has to be a mistake." His voice cracked, not with heartbreak, but with panic. Because it wasn't just the child. It was the story. The press. The shareholders. The board. Dean wasn't reacting to fatherhood stolen. He was reacting to control lost. He marched down the stairs, 2 at a time, catching up with Amira just as she stepped into the main hall. "Amira," he barked. "You better tell me this isn't real." She didn't turn. She reached for her car keys on the console and replied coolly, "You think I wanted this?" Dean stepped in front of her, blocking the door. "That's my child. I signed the birth certificate. You can't just take her away." Amira exhaled through her nose, eyes narrow. "She is mine, Dean. And the man who stood beside me through every sleepless night and doctor's visit? He didn't need paperwork to show up." Dean's face flushed red. "Are you saying this is about him, that security guy?" She tilted her head. "His name is Soren. And unlike you, he knew what kind of tea eased my nausea. He held my hand during contractions while you were overseas making speeches." Dean growled. "So you just, cheated on me and made me the fool?" Amira finally looked him in the eyes. "No, Dean. You made yourself the fool the day you stopped coming home before midnight. The day you started treating my body like a contract you already closed." Dean's voice dropped. "You know what this looks like? You've humiliated me. I built everything we have and you—" Amira cut in. "You built yourself, Dean. I was just the silent photo op you needed at fundraisers." He stepped back, stunned. "Is this revenge?" "No," she said, picking up her purse. "This is release." She walked past him. He reached for her arm, but this time, she pulled away. "You're not touching me again, Dean. Not in love, not in anger, not in guilt." He followed her to the front door, voice breaking now. "So that's it? You're walking away, just like that?" Amira stopped with her hand on the knob. "You lost me a long time ago. This test just made it official." The car waiting outside wasn't flashy. Not for a woman like Amira, who had access to every luxury. She didn't care. She climbed into the back seat like she was shedding her skin, layer by layer, until she was just a woman again. Not a brand. Not a trophy. Not a hostage to someone else's image. Dean remained at the front door, staring as the car eased down the driveway. He didn't yell. Didn't call out. Because beneath the shock, beneath the ego, something cracked. And for once, there was no assistant to fix it. No press release to spin it. Just silence. And a child upstairs who didn't carry his name. The ride was quiet. Amira stared out the window, the DNA folder still in her lap, unopened again, though the truth had already scorched her clean. Her phone buzzed. Soren. One word on the screen. She didn't answer. Not yet. Because this wasn't about jumping from one man to another. This was about arriving in her own life. About no longer apologizing for wanting to be seen, to be felt, to be cherished. Not kept, not displayed. Loved. Back at the estate, Dean was on his phone again. But this time, his voice shook. "I need legal on this. Now. And PR. We need to get ahead of this before someone leaks it." He rubbed his forehead, pacing. "No, I don't care about the marriage. But the kid. The scandal, you don't get it. If this goes public—" He didn't finish the sentence. Because even in his damage control, Dean Holloway still hadn't asked how Amira felt. Just how he looked. The knife moved in slow, deliberate strokes. Back and forth. Not for violence. For focus. Soren Vale sat on a wooden stool in the small guest house behind the Holloway estate, sharpening a blade the way some men prayed. He wasn't expecting visitors. Least of all her. But when the knock came, he didn't flinch. He knew that rhythm. Knew that pause between each one. Knew it was Amira, before her voice confirmed it. "Soren. It's me." He rose slowly, setting the knife down beside a cloth. When he opened the door, she stood there, hood pulled up, sunglasses off, hair falling around her face like she'd walked through a windstorm of grief and clarity. But it wasn't the look on her face that froze him. It was the envelope in her hand. She didn't speak right away. Just stepped inside. Slowly. Like each step cost something. Soren closed the door behind her, not asking questions. "Not yet." She sat down on the edge of the couch, still silent. Finally she whispered, "It's done." He nodded once. "Dean knows?" She handed him the opened folder. He didn't touch it. "I don't need to see it," he said. "I already knew." Her eyes filled, again. But she blinked the tears back. "I kept thinking it would feel like punishment, or shame, but it doesn't," she said. "It feels clean." Soren moved closer, but not too close. "Because it is clean," he replied. "You didn't do this to destroy anything. You did it to stop surviving." She looked up. "I need you to say it." He tilted his head. "Say what?" "That I'm not filthy. That I didn't wreck a home." He didn't blink. "You didn't wreck a home, Amira. You escaped a performance." Her voice cracked. "Do you remember the night I nearly fainted at the second scan? I was there. You remember the doctor saying the baby's heart rate dipped for a minute? I didn't leave your side. And when I was in labor, screaming for someone, and Dean was in a different time zone, I stood at that door the entire night," he said. "I would have broken it down if they didn't let me in." Amira exhaled sharply, face crumpling. "I know," she said. "I remember now. Every time I needed someone, it was you." Soren stayed still. Let her process it. Let her arrive at her own truth. Because men like him didn't demand credit. They just showed up. Her voice dropped. "But I was scared. scared that needing you would mean betraying something sacred. He crouched in front of her now. You didn't betray anything sacred. You discovered what sacred actually feels like. Tears finally spilled over her cheeks. I tried so hard to be the perfect wife, to look perfect, walk perfect, host the perfect charity gala. But I was rotting inside. You weren't rotting, he said. You were waiting. For what? For someone who wouldn't ask you to shrink. She reached out slowly, touching the side of his face. Her hand was warm, trembling. I still feel like I don't deserve peace, she said. Soren leaned into her palm. You don't have to earn peace, he murmured. You just stop running from it. The room stilled. She leaned forward, pressed her forehead against his. I'm tired, she whispered. I know. And then, the kiss, not rushed, not hesitant, just honest. He didn't pull her onto him. He pulled her into him. Their bodies pressed together, but it wasn't about release. It was about recognition of every silent moment they'd survived, every laugh that never happened, every tear no one saw but him. Amira's lips parted as Soren kissed her again, slow, steady, and reverent. No force, no claiming, just the kind of kiss that listens. She didn't pull away. She pressed closer, every second a permission. Her hands slid into the fabric of his shirt, clinging, not out of lust but anchoring. For months, she'd been adrift. Now, with him, she felt gravity. Soren guided her gently down the hall to the bedroom. It wasn't lavish. No chandeliers, no white-gloved staff. But it was warm, clean, and quiet. She sat on the edge of the bed, fingers curled in her robe, breathing unsteady. I should feel ashamed, she said softly. He crouched in front of her, voice firm but gentle. No, you should feel free. She met his eyes. Are you sure? Soren nodded once. I've never been more sure of anything. She released the knot at her waist. The robe fell open, slow, natural, like a truth no longer needing to hide. Soren didn't rush to touch her. He looked at her like she was something known, not judged. He kissed her shoulder first, then her collarbone. Her breath hitched, not from shock, but recognition. Every place his mouth touched said, I see you. He leaned forward, easing her back onto the sheets. The robe slid off completely. She didn't cover herself. Soren kissed down her torso like each mark, each curve, each scar, had a story he honored. When he reached her hips, he paused. She nodded. No words. And then, he lowered himself between her thighs, slowly, respectfully. Not as a man hungry for conquest, but as someone reclaiming a lost part of her worth. His mouth was warm, deliberate. She gasped. Not just from pleasure, but because it felt safe to feel again. Her hand gripped the sheets, her other tangled in his hair. Her legs trembled with each kiss, each stroke, each whisper of breath. She wasn't being taken. She was being chosen. When she pulled him up, wrapped her legs around him, she whispered, now. He hesitated. Looked her in the eyes. You sure? She nodded. Then let me make you believe in softness again. He entered her slowly, deep, thick, patient, and Amira gasped like she was breathing for the first time in a year. No moans for performance, no desperate rhythm, just the sound of her body remembering what tenderness felt like. He moved inside her with reverence, like she was a space to protect, not a puzzle to solve. Later, as they lay together in the warm quiet, her hand rested over his chest, rising and falling with his breath. Soren spoke first. I don't expect anything from you. She turned to him. Except what? He brushed her cheek with his knuckles. Except truth, whatever that looks like. Her voice cracked. I don't know what this is yet. He kissed her forehead. You don't have to. You just have to let it be. She closed her eyes, smiled faintly, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she owed the world an explanation. Across the estate, Dean sat in his office, staring at a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. The DNA paper sat crumpled beside his laptop. His assistant had asked 3 times if he was still attending the industry gala. He hadn't answered. He wasn't thinking about investors. He was thinking about how a woman he thought he owned had slipped through his hands, not because she cheated, but because he never showed up. The morning Amira's lawyer delivered the divorce papers, Dean didn't rage. He didn't slam doors. Didn't pace the room barking threats like before. He sat at his glass desk, staring at the stack of papers, his reflection just barely visible. One line stood out: irreconcilable differences. It sounded clinical, but Dean knew what it meant. It meant he had pushed a woman so far out of love that even proof of betrayal couldn't compete with the weight of his absence. He signed with a pen that cost more than some people's rent. The ink dried faster than his pride. A week later, Amira stepped into her new villa. It was perched on the cliffs above the Pacific. Wide glass walls, open space, fewer staff, no photographers, just silence. Not the cold kind, the kind that makes room for breathing. Soren followed behind, carrying a small box of baby clothes. He didn't ask where she wanted them placed. He just moved instinctively, settling them in the nursery without words. Amira looked around. There were no marble statues, no grand staircases. But for the first time in a year, she felt like she could take her shoes off without being watched. Mornings began with the sound of the baby's COO. Soren was always up first. Always. He changed diapers like it was sacred. When the baby fussed, he hummed softly, rocking side to side in the hallway until her tiny hands calmed. Amira often watched from the doorway, quiet, amazed, overwhelmed. Not because Soren was extraordinary in what he did, but because no one had ever done it for her before without being asked. They didn't label what was happening. No boyfriend. No partner. Just there. Each night, Amira cooked simple dinners. Nothing like the catered nonsense Dean demanded. Soren washed the dishes. Then they sat together, sometimes talking, sometimes not. He never rushed her. Never tried to define what they had. He just lived in it. One evening she asked, "Aren't you afraid of this being temporary?" Soren looked at her across the table. Everything in life is temporary, but showing up, every day, that's permanent where it counts. One evening while Amira folded laundry on the floor, Soren walked in making silly faces. The baby burst out laughing, loud belly-deep giggles Amira had never heard before. She froze. Not because she hadn't seen the baby smile, but because this laugh felt like joy with no weight. She dropped the towel and joined them, resting her head on Soren's shoulder as he lifted the baby into the air. The child squealed again. And for the first time in months, Amira laughed too. Not a social laugh. Not a trained laugh. Just real. Back in the city, Dean Holloway stood before a boardroom of men in suits. They nodded through his speech about resilience, growth, expansion. But their eyes weren't fully locked in. Whispers had started. The media hadn't gotten hold of the full story, but they sensed something had shifted. Dean saw it. In the subtle pauses. The lingering looks. The kind of silence powerful men fear most. The kind that comes right before exposure. But Dean wasn't worried about the scandal anymore. He was thinking about the baby he never rocked. The cries he never answered. The silence he created. The villa was quiet, save for the hum of the ocean wind tapping the windows. The baby had finally fallen asleep, curled under a cotton blanket, cheeks still rosy from laughter. Amira stepped out onto the patio barefoot, arms wrapped around herself. The air was cool but not cold. The kind that didn't chase you back inside, but made you think deeper. She heard footsteps behind her, familiar now. Solid. Slow. Soren. He didn't speak. Just stood behind her, letting her lead. She leaned back, letting her shoulder rest against his chest. For a while, neither said a word. Then softly she whispered, "It still scares me." Soren rested his chin atop her head. "What does this, you?" All of it feeling safe. She turned to face him. "In my old life, I always had to act, smile, pose, keep everything smooth. And now, here with you, it's like my body's waiting for the performance to begin again." Soren cupped her jaw gently. "There is no stage here, Amira. No audience, no approval to earn." She swallowed hard. "And if I fall apart? I'll be right here," he said. "Not fixing you, just staying." That night, she didn't dress in silk. She wore a loose cotton shirt. No makeup, no perfume. Just skin and truth. When she stepped into the bedroom, Soren was already lying there, shirtless, waiting, not expecting. She crawled into bed beside him, rested her head on his chest. They lay in silence, her fingers tracing patterns across his collarbone. His arm wrapped around her waist. "You're shaking," he murmured. "I know." He turned slightly, brushing his lips across her temple. "I'll follow your pace." She tilted her head to meet his eyes. Then kiss me like I won't break." Their lips met again, this time slower than before. Not out of fear, but reverence. Soren kissed her like time didn't matter. She pulled his shirt off fully, trailing her fingertips down his chest, learning him. When he touched her, it wasn't possession. It was permission. Asking through motion, not words. His hands mapped her slowly, resting on her hip bones before traveling to her thighs, her back, the base of her spine. She pressed closer, arched into him. No commands. No roles. Just response. As he moved inside her, again slowly, she clutched his shoulder and whispered, "I never felt this before. Not even on our wedding night." His breath hitched. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm not rushing it." Every movement felt like release, not of passion alone, but pressure, like she was peeling off years of expectation. She didn't cry. She didn't speak much. But when it ended, when they lay tangled in the sheets, bodies warm and limbs draped, she exhaled a breath she didn't know she'd been holding for years. Minutes later, the baby stirred. Soren moved first, throwing on sweats and tiptoeing to the nursery. Amira stayed in bed, smiling softly. She heard him sing. Off-key, but sweet. A lullaby. Not something borrowed from childhood, just something he made up on the spot. When he returned, she was still smiling. "Do I want to know what you were singing?" she teased. He shrugged. "Made it up. Worked though." She pulled him back into bed. "Stay, please. Always." When morning came, Amira didn't wake up tense. She didn't check her phone for damage control. She didn't rehearse a speech in her head for interviews or donors. She rolled over, looked at Soren sleeping peacefully, and just watched him breathe. His hand, still resting near her hip. Her body, no longer bracing for rejection. The baby stirred again. Soren opened one eye and smiled. "I've got it." She nodded, still under the covers. This time she didn't watch him from the doorway. She followed him. And when their daughter saw them together, Amira's hair messy, Soren still half asleep, the baby giggled. Like this was the picture she'd always deserved. The sunrise stretched across the cliffs like a new beginning. Amira stood alone on the balcony of her villa, a coffee in one hand, her daughter's birthday balloon gently swaying behind her. Inside, soft music played. The smell of warm pancakes drifted through the air. But Amira wasn't celebrating. Not yet. She was remembering. The hospital lights. The sterile paperwork. The silence after her daughter's first cry. Because the man who should have been there wasn't. She didn't regret the child. Not for a second. But today, the memory had weight. Soren stepped out, still barefoot, still calm. He held the baby on one hip. The child wore a gold paper crown, and a bib with one stitched across it in soft thread. "Someone's ready to party," he said, smiling. Amira returned a small one but didn't say anything. Soren set the baby in her high chair inside, then walked back out. "You've been standing here for 30 minutes, he said gently. "Thinking?" She nodded. "Too much. I should feel proud," she said. "We made it a year, she's healthy. We're here, but..." Amira looked down at the waves crashing below. "I still carry it. The shame, the mistake. I brought the wrong man into her life. I opened the door to someone who didn't deserve her. Or me." Soren didn't speak right away. Then, "You didn't choose wrong, you chose based on what you knew then." She turned to him. "And what I knew was broken." Soren shook his head. "No. What you knew was what you were taught to accept. You were surviving." He took a step closer. "You didn't bring her into shame, Amira. You brought her into the world with strength." She looked away, tears brimming again. "People still whisper. They call it scandal. They think I'm hiding." He reached for her hand. "Let them whisper. You're not hiding, you're healing. And that takes more courage than staying in a glass house." She exhaled. Slow, measured. "Do you think I'll ever stop feeling it?" Soren looked her in the eye. "No. But you'll start recognizing that it's not guilt, it's growth." Amira looked toward the sea again. "I want her to grow up never questioning her worth." "She won't," Soren said. "Because she'll watch you live yours out loud." Amira smiled faintly, the first genuine one that morning. "You're good at this," she said. "At what?" "Lifting what I try to bury." He leaned in and kissed her hand. "I don't lift it. I just hold the corner until you're ready to let go." A moment passed. Then Amira turned, headed back inside. The living room had been decorated with simple touches, balloons, a cake with no fondant, just whipped cream and strawberries. Soren had done it all with one hand, the baby on his hip. Amira walked over and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Happy birthday, little star." The child clapped and squealed. And just like that, without forcing it, Amira felt something shift. The guilt didn't vanish. But for the first time, it didn't win the day. The press didn't expect her to show. Not after the headlines, not after the divorce, not after walking away from the Holloway name. But Amira didn't flinch. She stepped onto the stage of her foundation's launch, her daughter balanced on her hip, a mic in her other hand. The backdrop read, "The Marin Foundation, for Single Mothers." Reporters leaned forward, pens ready, cameras flashed. But Amira didn't start with stats, or funding, or a rehearsed speech. She looked out into the crowd, and began with the truth. "I didn't lose everything," she said. "I left what was never mine to keep." Gasps, silence. She continued. "For a long time I thought silence protected my peace. But now I know, truth does." She paused, scanning the room. "Yes, I had a child outside my marriage. Yes, I chose to walk away from a comfortable life. And no, I'm not ashamed." Her voice held steady. "I didn't betray anyone. I simply stopped betraying myself." Some clapped. Others exchanged looks. But Amira didn't speak for their reaction. She spoke for every woman who had ever stayed too long, hoping presence would one day match the promises. After the event, a reporter pulled her aside. Off the record, he asked, "Are you seeing anyone now?" Amira smiled, not the rehearsed kind, but quiet, centered. "I'm not looking for love," she replied. "I just finally learned how to recognize it." The reporter chuckled. "That's going to be quoted everywhere." She shrugged. "That's fine, let them quote it." Behind her, Soren waited by the car. No suit, no tie, just solid as always. Her daughter clapped from his arms as she approached. That night, the house smelled of lavender and warm pasta. Soren poured her a glass of wine, placed her favorite song on the speaker, and didn't ask how the event went. He just kissed her temple. "You carried yourself," he whispered. "Exactly how I always saw you." They ate in silence. Later, when the baby was asleep, Amira curled up beside him on the couch. He kissed the back of her hand, slow like punctuation to a sentence she'd written herself. That night, she didn't ask. He didn't speak. But when he touched her, softly, reverently, it wasn't to distract her from the world. It was to remind her that the world had no hold here. She guided him into her like breath. They moved together, no rush, no script. Just two people who had survived truth, and still chose each other. When he whispered, "You are not broken," she didn't cry. She believed it. The next morning, sunlight poured through the wide glass windows. Amira stood in her daughter's room, watching the little one babble to her stuffed lion. Soren leaned in the doorway. "She's got your strength," he said. Amira turned. "She's got your calm." He smiled. "She's got her own future." Amira nodded. "And I'm done apologizing for how I brought her here." Months later, the memoir was released. Inheritance Isn't Biology. Bestseller within a week. In book tours, Amira never talked about scandal. She talked about choices, about ownership, about starting again without shame. Every city she visited, single mothers filled the seats, nodding, crying, standing. At one event, a young woman raised her hand. "Are you still with the man from the book?" Amira's lips curled softly. "He never asked to be written in," she said. "But he's there. In every chapter." And that night, when the cameras turned off and the lights dimmed, Soren reached for her hand under the table and whispered, "I'll always be here." Not because he had to, but because she let him. My beautiful family, thank you for staying with me till the end of this heartfelt story. If it touched your soul, type "love still wins" in the comments so I know you're with me. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Cedar Light Love Stories, where every tale reminds us that love always finds a way.